Twisted Fame presents a story where captivity becomes an obsession. She told me it was my duty to marry a stranger and settle a debt. She didn't tell me he was the most feared man in the city. Man who ruled with an iron fist and a loaded gun. She thought she'd sold me into a life of misery. But she made one fatal mistake. She didn't know that the Mafia King would fall for his captive bride. This is our story of dangerous obsession and the revenge that shook the underworld.
Welcome to Twisted Fame, where the drama is real and the stories are wild. Support the channel by liking, subscribing, and commenting. Let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Pawn. My stepmother, Celeste, didn't just walk into a room. She invaded it, leaving a trail of chilled air and expensive perfume in her wake. For 10 years, since my father's sudden death, that perfume had been the scent of my prison. Our once warm, book-filled home had been stripped bare and reborn as a cold monument to her social climbing, and I, Alara, was the one inconvenient, dusty relic from a past she desperately wanted to erase. I was arranging a vase of lilies, my mother's favorite flower, the only act of quiet rebellion I could manage, when she spoke from the doorway. "Stop fussing with those weeds, Alara. We have a guest." And put on the blue silk dress. "You look like a ghost in that rag." Her voice was like shards of glass, smooth and sharp. The dress she referred to was a shade of icy blue she had chosen, designed to make me look fragile, pliable. A perfect accessory for her negotiations. I knew what this was about. For months, she had been parading a procession of her friends' arrogant sons in front of me, each one more insufferable than the last. I was 22, a burden on her finances, and my only worth was in a strategic marriage. "I'm not interested in meeting another one of your banker boys, Celeste," I said, my voice quieter than I wished it was. A cruel smile painted her lips. "Oh, this is no banker, my dear. This is Mr. Valerius. And he is not a man you keep waiting." The name meant nothing to me, but the way she said it, with a mix of fear and avarice, sent a cold trickle of dread down my spine. An hour later, I was sitting in the stark white living room, the blue silk feeling like a straitjacket, when he arrived. He didn't knock. The massive oak door simply opened, and he filled the frame. He was not like the polished, preening men Celeste usually associated with. He was older, maybe in his late 30s, and built not for a boardroom but for a battlefield. His suit was impeccably tailored, a dark charcoal that seemed to absorb the light, but it couldn't disguise the raw power beneath. His face was all hard lines and sharp angles, with a jaw that looked like it was carved from granite. And his eyes, they were the color of a winter storm, and they scanned the room with a chilling, detached assessment before landing on me. I felt pinned, like a butterfly in a display case. "Mr. Valerius," Celeste simpered, her bravado completely gone, replaced by a nervous deference. "This is my daughter, Alara." He didn't acknowledge her. His gaze remained on me, intense, probing. He walked forward, each step silent and deliberate, and stopped directly in front of my chair. He didn't offer a hand. He simply looked down at me, and for a terrifying second, I saw something flicker in those stormy eyes. Not kindness, but a spark of recognition? Interest? It was gone as quickly as it came. "Alara," he said. His voice was a low rumble, like distant thunder, and it vibrated deep in my bones. He said my name as if he were tasting it, testing its weight. Then he turned to Celeste. "The terms are acceptable. The debt is cleared. She comes with me now." My heart stopped. "What?" The word was a choked whisper. "What debt? Comes where?" Celeste's face was a mask of giddy relief. "It's done, Alara. It's all settled. Your father, he left behind certain complications. Mr. Valerius has generously agreed to make them disappear. In return, you will be his wife." The world tilted. Wife? This wasn't a negotiation, it was a sale. My father, my kind, gentle father, was being used as the excuse for this transaction. Rage, hot and fierce, finally broke through my fear. "I am not a piece of property to be sold to settle a debt." I stood up, my hands trembling, but my voice was steady. "I refuse." Mr. Valerius, my husband-to-be, finally looked at me again. A ghost of a smile, cold and utterly humorless, touched his lips. "Refusal is not one of the terms, Solnishko." Solnishko, little son. The endearment coming from him was a violation. "You can't force me," I challenged, my gaze darting between his impassive face and Celeste's triumphant one. In response, he simply pulled out his phone, typed a single message, and held the screen up to me. It was a live video feed. It showed my best friend, Lena, laughing as she left her university library, completely unaware of the black sedan idling across the street. My blood ran cold. "The world is a cruel place, Alara," Valerius said, his voice dangerously soft. "I can be its cruelest aspect, or I can be your shelter from it. The choice is, in fact, yours. But choose quickly." The threat was unspoken but absolute. Come willingly, or everyone I loved would pay the price. I looked at Celeste, who wouldn't meet my eyes. I looked at the man who owned me, his expression one of bored patience. I was utterly and completely alone. The fight drained out of me, leaving a hollow, cold shell. I had no cards to play, no one to call for help. With a numbness that felt like death, I gave a single, sharp nod. Valerius pocketed his phone. "Wise girl." He turned and walked toward the door, fully expecting me to follow. I took one last look at the house that was no longer my home, at the stepmother who had sold me, and I took a step forward. Then another. I walked out of my old life and into the gilded, terrifying unknown, the shadow of the mafia boss falling over me, swallowing me whole. The pawn had been moved. The game had begun. Chapter 2, The Gilded Cage. The car was a silent, moving tomb. It smelled of rich leather and something else, something cold and metallic, like the scent of a drawn sword. Valerius didn't speak. He spent the entire ride scrolling through messages on an encrypted phone, the blue light etching the severe lines of his face in the darkness. I sat pressed against the far door, the icy blue silk of my dress feeling like a costume for my own execution. I watched the familiar streets of my life blur and vanish, replaced by districts of increasing exclusivity and isolation. We did not stop at a house. We arrived at a fortress. The car glided through imposing, black iron gates that swung open soundlessly, revealing a sprawling, modern monolith of glass and steel perched on a cliff edge, overlooking the churning, black ocean. No warm lights welcomed us. The structure was a razor-sharp silhouette against the moody sky, its countless windows like dark, unblinking eyes. The front door was a massive slab of aged oak, opened by a man who was clearly more soldier than butler. He had a grim, weathered face and eyes that scanned the perimeter even as he gave a curt nod. "Sir." Valerius finally acknowledged my existence. "This is Alara. She is to be my wife. She does not leave the grounds." "Understood." The man's eyes flicked to me, assessing, recording. "Understood, sir." And just like that, my boundaries were set. I was a prized bird, my new cage simply larger and more beautiful than the last. Valerius led me inside. The interior was breathtaking and soul-crushingly cold. Vast open spaces, soaring ceilings, everything in shades of gray, black, and stark white. It was meticulously curated, devoid of personal touches. No photographs, no messy books, no evidence that a human heart beat within these walls. It was a museum, and I was its newest, most unwilling exhibit. "This is your home now," Valerius stated, his voice echoing in the cavernous living area. "Your rooms are upstairs. Dimitri will bring your things." "I have no things," I whispered, the reality of my abrupt uprooting hitting me. "You took me from my home with nothing but the clothes on my back." He paused, turning to look at me. The storm in his eyes seemed to calm for a moment, not into warmth, but into a calculating stillness. "You will have everything you need. Clothes, jewels, anything you desire." "I desire my freedom," I said, finding a sliver of courage in my anger. A slow, dangerous smile touched his lips. "That is the one thing I cannot give you, Solnishko." He showed me to my rooms. It was a lavish suite, complete with a private balcony that offered a stunning, terrifying view of the violent sea below. The doors to the balcony were reinforced steel, masquerading as glass, and I knew they would be locked from the outside. The windows, I would soon discover, did not open. "You will join me for dinner at 8, he said from the doorway. "Do not be late." The door closed, and I heard the definitive click of a lock. I was alone. I sank onto the edge of the enormous, empty bed, the silence of the room pressing in on me. This wasn't a marriage. It was a captivity. The days bled into a monotonous rhythm of isolated terror. I was dressed by a silent maid, fed exquisite meals I could barely taste, and left to wander the sterile, beautiful prison. Valerius was a ghost in his own home. I would catch glimpses of him, striding through a hallway, speaking in low, commanding tones on the phone, always surrounded by his grim-faced men. He barely acknowledged me, except for our dinners. Those dinners were a special kind of torture. We would sit at a table long enough to seat 20, at opposite ends, the silence broken only by the clink of silverware. He would watch me, his gaze a physical weight, as if he were studying a complex equation he couldn't solve. One night, a week into my imprisonment, I broke the silence. "Why me?" My voice was small in the vast dining room. "You could have any woman. Why did you buy me from my stepmother like a piece of livestock?" He finished chewing his food slowly, deliberately, before answering. "Celeste did not sell you, Alara. She gave you to me to pay a debt your father owed. A debt of blood." The piece of bread I was holding turned to ash in my mouth. "My father? No. He was a good man. A teacher. He wouldn't." "Good men often make bad enemies," Valerius interrupted, his voice flat. "He crossed a man he should have feared. That man was going to kill your entire family. Celeste knew this. She came to me, begging for protection. My protection has a price. You were that price. I saved your life before you even knew it was in danger." The revelation stole the air from my lungs. It was a different story, a darker, more complicated truth. Was he my captor or my savior? The line was suddenly, terrifyingly blurred. Later that night, I was jolted awake by the sound of raised voices from downstairs. Then a single sharp crack that could only be one thing, a gunshot. My heart hammered against my ribs. I crept out of my room and peered down the sweeping staircase into the grand foyer. Valerius stood there, his posture relaxed, but his hand held a pistol, smoke still curling from the barrel. A man I didn't recognize was writhing on the floor, clutching his leg, a dark red stain spreading across his trousers. Two of Valerius's men stood by impassively. "You stole from me, Alexei," Valerius said, his voice not raised, but carrying with chilling clarity. "You know the price." "I'm sorry, Don Valerius." "Please," the man on the floor begged. Valerius didn't even look at him. He gestured to his men. "Clean it up, and get him out of my sight." As they dragged the weeping man away, Valerius lifted his head. His stormy eyes locked directly with mine from across the foyer. He had known I was there the entire time. He had wanted me to see. He stood there, the smoking gun still in his hand, surrounded by the evidence of his brutality, a king in his castle of shadows. This was the man I was to marry. Not just a rich, powerful stranger. A killer. A monster. And as his gaze held mine, I saw no remorse, no anger. Only a fierce, possessive certainty. I was his. His to protect, his to command, his to punish. I stumbled back into my room, my body shaking uncontrollably. I was trapped in a cage with a predator. And the most terrifying part of all was the tiny, traitorous part of my soul that, upon hearing his story, had felt a flicker of something other than fear. A flicker of understanding. The world was cruel, he had said. And tonight, he had shown me just how cruel he could be to those who crossed him. He had also, in his own twisted way, shown me that he was the only thing standing between me and that same cruelty. The cage was gilded, but it was still a cage. And I was its most precious prisoner. Chapter 3. The Devil's Confession ****. The gunshot echoed in my mind long after the foyer had been scrubbed clean. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Valerius's cold, detached expression as he stood over the bleeding man. I saw the way his eyes had found mine in the shadows, a deliberate demonstration of his power. He wasn't just a dangerous man. He was the law in this gilded fortress, and I was subject to his every whim. The next morning, the mansion was eerily silent, as if it too was holding its breath. The usual maid didn't come. When I ventured out of my room, the door was, as always, unlocked from the outside, but still a barrier I couldn't cross. A different kind of tension hung in the air, a silent vibration of aftermath. Valerius was in the sunroom, a stark, glass-walled space that felt like a mockery of the warmth it was supposed to embody. He wasn't working. He was simply standing, staring out at the turbulent sea, a crystal glass of amber liquid in his hand. He looked more like a predator contemplating its territory than a man enjoying a view. "Did you sleep well, Solnishko?" he asked without turning around. His voice was a low rumble that seemed to resonate in the hollow of my chest. How could I? The words were out before I could stop them, sharp and laced with a tremor I hated. "After what I saw, what you did." He finally turned. The morning light carved his features into something even more severe, yet there was a weariness in his eyes I hadn't seen before. "What you saw was justice. My justice. It is swift and it is final. It is how I maintain order in my world." "Your world of violence and fear?" I shot back, my hands clenched at my sides. "My world of survival," he corrected, his gaze piercing me. "A world your father was foolish enough to stumble into. My father was a history teacher. I cried out, the frustration and grief of weeks boiling over. He collected antique maps and drank too much tea. He didn't have a world like yours. Valerius studied me for a long moment, then gestured to the chair opposite him. Sit. It wasn't a request. It was a command. But this time, it was wrapped in the promise of answers. I sat, perching on the edge, my body coiled tight. He took a slow sip of his drink, the ice clinking in the heavy silence. Your father, Alexander, was not just a teacher. He was one of the most respected authenticators of historical Russian documents in the world. A true artist in his field. I stared, stunned into silence. I knew of his expertise, but the way Valerius said it, it sounded like a title of great import. 6 months before he died, Valerius continued, his voice dropping, he was hired to authenticate a collection of imperial letters for a private collector. A man named Gregor Zima. The name meant nothing to me, but the way Valerius said it made the air grow cold. Zima is a Vori, a thief-in-law from the old country. A man without honor, who deals in flesh and weapons. He wanted the letters to be declared authentic, to increase their value for a sale to a rival syndicate. Your father. He discovered they were brilliant forgeries. He refused to sign the certificate. My heart thudded against my ribs. This was a side of my father I never knew. A man of unshakable principle facing a monster. Zima did not take no for an answer, Valerius said, his eyes darkening. He threatened your father. When that didn't work, he threatened you. Your father came to me. He knew of my reputation. He knew I had no love for Zima, a man who brings shame to our culture with his lack of code. Your father begged for my protection. For you. Tears welled in my eyes, blurring the image of the ruthless man before me. So you protected us? For a price, Valerius said, his voice flat. I am not a charity, Alara. I am a businessman. Your father offered me the one thing of value he had left. His loyalty. And you. The debt of blood, I whispered, the pieces crashing together. Duh. The debt of blood. I eliminated the threat Zima posed to your family. In return, your father pledged his daughter to me. It was a contract. He is gone, but the contract remains. Celeste knew this. She was only too happy to hand you over when Zima's men started circling again after your father's death. His words were like physical blows. My father, my gentle, bookish father, had bargained with the devil to save me. He had promised me to this man to keep me safe. The knowledge was a devastating, heartbreaking relief. He hadn't abandoned me. He had, in his own desperate way, tried to save me. I looked at Valerius, truly looked at him. The mafia boss. The killer. My fiancé. The man who had, by his own brutal code, honored a contract with a dead man and shielded me from a fate potentially worse than this one. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice raw. He set his glass down with a definitive click. Because I am tired of you looking at me like I am a monster who plucked you from a happy life. I am many things, Alara. I am cruel. I am merciless to my enemies. But I am a man of my word. You are under my protection. You are mine. And I take care of what is mine. He stood up, his presence once again dominating the room. The wedding is in 1 week. You will be my wife in name and in truth. Accept this. It is the only path that leads to your survival. He walked out, leaving me alone with the devastating truth. My prison had just become infinitely more complex. The bars were no longer just of steel and glass, but of my father's love of a bloody debt and of a terrifying, fierce promise from a man who was both my jailer and my shield. The monster had a reason, a code, a story, and that made him infinitely more dangerous. Chapter 4. A crack in the armor. The wedding was a blade hanging over my head, its sharp edge counting down the days. Valerius's confession had shattered my world and rebuilt it into something even more confusing. The man I feared was also the man my father had entrusted with my life. My cage was a sanctuary. My jailer, my protector. The conflict within me was a constant, churning storm. He began to treat me less like a hostage and more like his. His presence was a constant, shadowing my every move within the mansion. He no longer allowed me to eat alone. Our silent dinners evolved into a quiet, intense interrogation of my life. Tell me about your mother, he commanded one evening, his stormy eyes fixed on me. The question was so unexpected it disarmed me. I spoke haltingly at first, then the words tumbled out. I told him of her laughter, her love for painting wild, untamed seascapes, the way she filled our old house with music and light. I spoke of the illness that stole her away, piece by piece. To my horror, my eyes welled with tears. Valerius listened, utterly still. He didn't offer comfort. He didn't speak. He simply absorbed my story, my pain, as if filing it away. When I finished, he gave a single, slow nod. A strong woman. You have her fire. It was the first time he had said anything that resembled a compliment. It unsettled me more than his threats ever had. A few days later, I was in the library, tracing the spines of the leather-bound books, a poor substitute for the cozy, cluttered bookstore I used to frequent. Valerius entered, holding a flat, rectangular package wrapped in plain brown paper. "For you," he said, placing it on the table. Warily, I untied the string. Inside was a book, but not just any book. It was a first-edition collection of Anna Akhmatova's poetry, the cover worn soft with age. My breath caught. Akhmatova was my mother's favorite. How could he have known? I looked up at him, my questions silent in my eyes. "A man in my position learns everything about what is his," he said simply, his voice a low gravel. "Your father mentioned it. Your mother read it to you. He had not just bought me a random expensive gift. He had unearthed a piece of my soul, a memory I clung to in the darkness. It was a gesture of such terrifying, intimate thoughtfulness that it felt more invasive than any display of violence. He was not just claiming my future. He was laying claim to my past. The night before the wedding, the storm broke. Literally, a howling gale whipped off the ocean, rattling the massive glass windows of the mansion. The power flickered and died, plunging the fortress into darkness, broken only by the frantic flashes of lightning. I stood in my dark room, watching the chaotic dance of the storm, my heart pounding in rhythm with the thunder. This wild, untamable fury outside mirrored the tempest inside me. There was a soft knock on my door before it opened. Valerius stood there, holding a single large candle. The flickering flame cast dancing shadows across his face, softening its hard lines, deepening the intensity in his eyes. He looked less like a corporate kingpin and more like a warrior chieftain from a forgotten age. "You are afraid," he stated. It wasn't a question. "Of the storm?" I lied, my voice barely a whisper. "No," he said, stepping into the room. The space suddenly felt incredibly small. "Of me. Of tomorrow." I couldn't deny it. I wrapped my arms around myself, shivering. He moved to the window, standing beside me, a solid, immovable presence against the chaos outside. "I am not a good man, Alara. I have done things that would haunt your dreams. I will do them again to keep what is mine safe." He turned his head, his gaze capturing mine in the candlelight. "But my word is my bond. I told your father I would protect you. That protection extends beyond Zima. It extends to anyone who would harm you. It extends to me." The admission was staggering. "I will protect you from myself." "Why?" I breathed, the word lost in a crack of thunder. "Why go to such lengths for a contract? For a stranger?" The lightning flashed, illuminating his face. And in that split second, I saw it. Not cold calculation, not bored possession. It was a raw, fierce, and terrifying hunger. "Because from the moment I saw you in that ridiculous blue dress, looking at me with more fire than fear, I knew," he growled, his voice rough and low, stripping away all pretense. "You were not a debt to be collected. You were a prize to be won. My beautiful, fierce Solnishko. You do not need my protection from the world. You need my protection from the darkness I would unleash upon it if anyone ever tried to take you from me." He didn't touch me. He didn't need to. His words were a brand, searing into my very soul. This was not the love from storybooks. It was a possession, an obsession, a fierce, all-consuming claim that was as terrifying as it was undeniable. He turned and left, taking the candle with him, leaving me in the dark with only the storm and the echo of his confession. The blade had fallen, and I realized with a jolt of pure, unadulterated terror that I was no longer sure I wanted to escape. A crack had formed in his armor of ice, and through it, I had seen a glimpse of the inferno within. And a treacherous, awakened part of me was drawn to its heat. Chapter 5. In the Name of the Boss. The wedding was not in a church. It was in the mansion's grand hall, under a canopy of woven silver and black silk, a ceremony as dark and opulent as the man I was marrying. I wore a gown of ivory lace, a masterpiece that felt like a costume for a role I still didn't know how to play. Valerius stood before me, not in a tuxedo, but in a sharply tailored black suit, a czar claiming his consort. His eyes held mine throughout the ancient, somber vows, his gaze a physical anchor in the surreal storm of the moment. When he slid the heavy, antique platinum band onto my finger, his thumb brushed my skin, a whisper of possession that sent a shiver through my entire body. There was no kiss. Only a slow, deliberate nod, sealing our fate. That night, the door between our rooms, which had always been locked, stood open. The silence in my suite was deafening, broken only by the frantic beat of my own heart. The confession in the storm had rewritten every rule. He was no longer just my captor, my protector. He was my husband, a man who had declared a fierce, terrifying claim over me. I stood frozen in the center of the room, my silk nightgown feeling like a mere wisp against the weight of the expectation hanging in the air. I heard his footsteps before I saw him. He appeared in the doorway, having shed his suit jacket and tie. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the strong column of his throat. He looked at me, his stormy eyes dark with an emotion I was too afraid to name. "You are trembling," he observed, his voice a low rumble in the quiet room. I couldn't speak. I could only nod. He didn't move toward me. He simply stood there, a king in the threshold of his queen's chamber, allowing the tension to stretch to its breaking point. "I will not force you, Alara," he said, the words shocking in their bluntness. "I take what is mine, but I do not take what is not offered." It was the last shred of honor in a man who operated outside the law. And it was that, more than any threat or display of power, that broke me. He had given me a choice. A tiny, terrifying sliver of agency in a life where I had none. I thought of the poetry book, of the way he had stood with me in the storm, of the brutal, unwavering truth of his protection. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was now entwined with something else, a desperate, pulsing curiosity. What would it be like to touch the inferno? Taking a shuddering breath, I took one step forward. Then another. I closed the distance between us until I stood before him, my head tilted back to meet his gaze. I saw the surprise there, quickly masked by a smoldering intensity. Slowly, giving him every opportunity to pull away, I raised my hand and placed my palm flat against his chest, over his heart. I felt the powerful, steady beat of it against my skin, a rhythm of pure, controlled strength. It was my answer, my surrender, my choice. A low sound, almost a growl, rumbled in his chest. His hands came up to frame my face, his touch not gentle, but possessive, reverent. "Moya," he breathed. "Mine." And then his mouth was on mine. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a claiming, a conflagration. It was everything I had feared and everything I had, in my deepest secret self, craved. It was the storm outside given form, all thunder and lightning and devastating power. I didn't fight it. I met it with a fire of my own, my hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer, answering his fury with my own desperate, unleashed passion. He lifted me into his arms as if I weighed nothing and carried me to the bed, the world dissolving into a whirlwind of sensation. The heat of his skin, the scent of him, the possessive weight of his body. The monster and the man became one, and in his arms, I was not a pawn. I was his queen, his equal in this dark, passionate dance. The last of my resistance shattered, not from fear, but from a need so profound it drowned out everything else. Later, as dawn painted the sky in hues of rose and gold, I lay curled against him, his arm a heavy, secure band around my waist, his breathing even and deep in sleep. I traced the intricate tattoos that adorned his chest and arms, a map of a life I was only beginning to understand. They were not just ink, they were stories of loyalty, of survival, of a code that was as brutal as it was unwavering. I looked at his face, finally relaxed in slumber. The harsh lines were softened, the storm in his eyes hidden. In this quiet moment, I saw not the mafia boss, but the man who honored his debts, the man who protected what was his with a ferocity that shook the world, the man who had just shown me a tenderness within the violence that had utterly undone me. A terrifying, undeniable truth settled in my heart, as certain as the wedding band on my finger. I was no longer just as out of obligation or fear. Somewhere in the chaos, the threats, the poetry, and the storm, I had fallen in love with my husband, the cruel mafia boss, the man who held my heart as fiercely as he held his empire. I had stepped into the fire, and instead of being consumed, I had been forged anew. I was Alara Valerius, and I would stand by his side in the darkness and the light from this day until the end of our days. Chapter 6: The Queen's Gambit. The broken paintbrush lay between us on Valerius's steel desk, a stark, violent slash across the polished surface. The sight of it, of that sacred piece of my mother's memory so callously destroyed, did not bring tears. It lit a fuse inside me, a cold, burning fury that solidified the love and passion of the last 3 months into something unbreakable and sharp. Valerius was a statue of contained violence. The air around him vibrated with a silent, murderous rage I could feel in my teeth. His knuckles were white where he gripped the edge of the desk. "He will die," he stated, his voice the flat, dead calm before a tornado. "Slowly. He will beg for a death I will not grant him." He finally looked at me, his eyes a blizzard. "You will not leave this house. You will be guarded at all times. He will not get within a mile of you." The old Alara would have trembled and obeyed. The woman I had become, the wife of the dawn, met his storm with a glacier of my own. "No," I said. The word hung in the air, stark and challenging. His eyes narrowed, a flicker of surprise breaking through the fury. "This is not a negotiation, Alara," he growled, the command rolling off him in waves. "You're right. It's not." I walked around the desk until I stood before him, the broken paintbrush in my hand. "For months, you have shown me your world. You've taught me its language, its rules. You told me I was your queen, not your prisoner. Was that a lie?" His jaw tightened. "This is different. This is Zima. He is a rabid dog without code or honor. And he thinks I am your pretty, fragile weakness," I countered, my voice low and intense. "He sent this because he believes snapping a piece of my past will make me shatter. He believes that by threatening me, he can make you reactive, reckless. He is trying to checkmate the king by targeting the queen." I saw the logic click behind his eyes, the strategic part of his brain engaging despite the protective fury. "What are you suggesting?" he asked, his gaze searching mine, seeing the new, cold fire there. "I am suggesting we change the game." I placed the 2 halves of the brush on the desk. "He expects you to hide me away. He expects you to come at him with all your force, a direct assault that will cost you men and resources and potentially open you up to your other enemies." I leaned forward, my hands flat on the cool steel. "So we don't do that. We don't hide. We show him the one thing he cannot comprehend." "And what is that, Solnishko?" Valerius asked, a dark, intrigued gleam replacing some of the storm in his eyes. "A united front," I said, a sharp, dangerous smile touching my lips. "He wants to lure you out. Fine. We go out. Together. Publicly. The reclusive Don Valerius and his mysterious wife, emerging not in fear, but in defiance. We show your world and his that I am not a liability to be protected. I am your strength. Your partner. We let him see that his plan has failed before it even begins." Valerius was silent for a long moment, studying me as if seeing me for the first time. The girl he had taken was gone. In her place stood a woman forged in his fire, ready to wield it herself. A slow, predatory smile spread across his face, the most genuine one I had ever seen. It was filled with pride, possession, and a dark, thrilling anticipation. "You would use yourself as bait?" he murmured, reaching out to trace my jawline, his touch sending a shiver of shared purpose through me. "No," I corrected, my voice steady. "I would use myself as a blade. And you, my love, will be the hand that wields me." The plan was set in motion with ruthless efficiency. 3 nights later, we attended the opening of a new, obscenely expensive art gallery, an event Zima was known to use for his own laundering operations. It was our stage. I did not wear a demure gown. I wore a dress of liquid midnight, cut with razor-sharp lines, a masterpiece of armor-like elegance. At my throat, I wore not a diamond, but the heavy antique platinum wedding band Valerius had given me, strung on a chain. A symbol. I was his, and I was proud of it. We entered together, Valerius's hand a possessive, steadying pressure on the small of my back. The crowd parted, a sea of whispers and stunned faces. The ghost had materialized, and she was a queen. I saw him then across the room. Gregor Zima. A stout man with a bland face and dead, reptilian eyes. He was trying to look unaffected, but I saw the flicker of shock, then confusion, and finally, a sliver of unease as he watched me. I didn't look away. I met his gaze and I smiled, a small, cold, knowing curve of my lips. I saw the moment he understood. His plan had not provoked fear. It had provoked a declaration of war. I leaned closer to Valerius, whispering a comment about a painting, playing my part flawlessly. But my mind was elsewhere. I had seen another man, one of Zima's, slip a phone from his pocket and take a picture of us. Perfect. As we turned to leave, the message had been sent. The queen was not hiding in her castle. She was on the board, and she was moving. In the car, the silence was electric. Valerius took my hand, his thumb stroking over my knuckles. "You were magnificent," he said, his voice thick with something more than pride. It was awe. "It's only the first move," I replied, looking out at the city lights. "He's off balance. He's confused. A man like Zima, when confused, becomes reckless." Valerius lifted my hand to his lips, his eyes gleaming in the darkness. "Then we will be ready for his recklessness." I looked at my husband, the Mafia Boss, my partner in the darkness we now ruled together. The broken paintbrush had not shattered me. It had sharpened me. The pawn's journey was a distant memory. The Queen's gambit had begun, and I would play to win. Chapter 7. Reckoning in Crimson. The photo worked exactly as we had intended. The image of Don Valerius and his enigmatic wife, staring down Zima with icy defiance, spread through the underworld like a shockwave. The message was clear. The Valerius fortress was not just strong, it was united. The attempt to drive a wedge had only forged the steel tighter. Zima's recklessness came swiftly, as I predicted. It was not a subtle move. It was a brute force attack, a declaration of all-out war. 3 of Valerius's shipping warehouses were hit simultaneously in a coordinated arson attack. The news showed plumes of black smoke staining the sky, but the real damage was the message. I can still touch your empire. Valerius took the loss with a cold, calculating fury. He saw it not as a defeat, but as an opening. He has shown his hand, he told me in his study, maps and personnel files spread across the table. He is desperate. He strikes at property because he believes it is my heart. He is a fool. I stood beside him, no longer just an observer but a participant. He's trying to provoke you into the open, to a battlefield of his choosing. Duh, Valerius nodded, his finger tracing a route on a city map. But we will choose the battlefield. And the weapon. He had intelligence, gleaned from a terrified informant within Zima's ranks, about a meeting. Zima himself would be at a neutral territory nightclub, Oblivion, to finalize a major weapons deal. It was the perfect opportunity. But the club was a maze, heavily guarded, and Zima would be surrounded. "It's too fortified for a direct assault," one of his captains, a grim man named Ivan, grumbled. "We would lose too many men." "It's a trap." "Then we don't send men," I said quietly. All eyes in the room turned to me. Valerius's gaze was intense, questioning. "He expects your soldiers," I continued, my heart hammering but my voice steady. "He expects violence. He does not expect a distraction." The plan was audacious, dangerous, and born from my newfound understanding of this dark world. Valerius would create a diversion at the club's main entrance, drawing Zima's guards. Meanwhile, I would enter through the service entrance, disguised as a cocktail waitress. My mission was not to fight, but to find Zima's private booth and plant a single, powerful listening device. With the details of his deal, Valerius could dismantle it, bankrupt him, and hand the information to Zima's furious buyers, letting them enact their own revenge. Valerius hated it. The thought of me in the lion's den made the storm in his eyes rage. Yet, absolutely not. It is the only way he will be unguarded enough, I argued, placing my hand over his clenched fist. You taught me that victory goes to the one who is most unpredictable. He will never predict this. Trust me, my love. As I trust you. The war in his eyes was a tangible thing. The fierce, possessive beast warring with the strategic Dawn. Finally, the Dawn won. He gave a sharp, reluctant nod. If a single hair on your head is harmed, I will burn that entire city block to the ground with everyone in it. The inside of Oblivion was a sensory assault of pounding music, strobe lights, and sweating bodies. The tight, black uniform felt like a costume, the tray of drinks in my hand a flimsy prop. I moved through the crowd, my training kicking in. Keep your head down, move with purpose, be invisible. I found the service corridor that led to the VIP booths, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. Zima's booth was exactly where the intel said it would be. He was there, laughing, a glass of vodka in his hand, surrounded by 2 hulking bodyguards. For a terrifying second, his reptilian eyes scanned the corridor and passed over me. I was just staff. Invisible. My moment came when one of his men stepped away to take a call. I moved forward, pretending to adjust a bottle on a nearby service cart, my body shielding my hands. With a deftness that surprised me, I pressed the tiny, magnetic device deep beneath the lip of the velvet banquette. It was done. I turned to leave, the breath I didn't know I was holding finally releasing. And then, a hand clamped down on my arm like a vice. You. Girl. I froze. It was one of Zima's bodyguards. His eyes were suspicious. You don't belong back here. My mind went blank with terror. Before I could speak, a familiar, chillingly calm voice cut through the din. "She is with me." Valerius stood at the end of the corridor. He had abandoned the diversion. He was here. For me. His presence was so immense it seemed to suck the sound from the air. The bodyguard's grip loosened in shock. In that split second, all hell broke loose. Zima, seeing Valerius, roared and went for a gun. Valerius moved faster than I thought possible. A shot rang out, then another. The bodyguard holding me fell with a grunt. Valerius grabbed my arm, his grip iron, shoving me behind him as he returned fire, covering our retreat. We burst out of the service entrance into the cold night air, the sound of sirens wailing in the distance. He pushed me into a waiting car, his body shielding mine, his face a mask of primal fury and terror. In the safe, silent darkness of the car, he didn't speak. He just pulled me into his arms, his body trembling with a violence he could barely contain. He buried his face in my hair, his breath hot against my skin. "Never again," he rasped, his voice raw. "I nearly lost you. I saw him touch you and I would have torn the world apart." I clung to him, the adrenaline crashing, leaving me shaking. "The device. I planted it." He pulled back, cupping my face, his stormy eyes blazing with a ferocious mix of anger and a love so deep it was terrifying. "To hell with the device. You are my empire, Alara. You are my heart, and I will never, ever risk it again." The mission was a success. The listening device provided the evidence we needed. Zima's empire began to crumble within days. But the true victory, the true reckoning, happened in that car. I had proven I could be a blade in the darkness. But he had proven that for the man who loved me, the darkness itself was a price he would no longer let me pay. The queen had made her gambit, and the king, in his fierce, terrifying love, had just changed all the rules of the game. Their story proved that the most twisted paths can lead to the purest love. In the shadows, they found their light. If you believe that love can be a dangerous game, and that the greatest passions are often forged in fire, then you've come to the right place. Subscribe to Twisted Fame and hit the bell icon for your next obsession. We have more dark romances, forbidden passions, and stories where love doesn't just break the rules, it rewrites them.